What if uncovering the past isn't just about history, but about finding peace, forgiveness, and freedom in the present? Welcome to the PhD with Women in IT Hack the Future. My name is Jamil Navarrosa, and today's PhD Positivity Hack delivered will be by our guest, Laura Elliott. Our topic for today is about her book, Dear Laura, A Lost Chapter of World War II. Episode 194 starts here. Let me remind you, this is a grassroots community that focuses on women in IT, an inclusive forum of women in technology, startups, and female leaders who are supported by men as well. And I bring heart to that hustle because empathy is my mojo, and empathy is critical in discovering freedom through bearing witness to history. Before we start our discussion, I want to take a moment to shine a spotlight on some incredible achievements from our community. Huge congratulations to Madonna M. Buambua on your incredible recognition as your book being ranked number one by Book Authority as one of the best Android books that remain relevant today is a true testament to your impact in this tech community. Your dedication to mentoring, simplifying complex ideas, and empowering others continues to shape the future of Android development. Well deserved, Madonna. Join our other former PhD guest, Annie Goodrow, and an incredible lineup of experts at the OBF Gyms Wellness event on Wednesday, October 15, 2025. This empowering evening is designed for ambitious women ready to fuel their mind, body, and future. Expect inspiring talks, practical strategies, and networking opportunities to help you step into your strongest, most confident self. And last, join Maureen Josephine at the Femtech Conference Women in Tech EMEA Summit in Berlin this October 17, speaking on Through the Wild Lens powered by Flutter. Expect fresh perspectives, expert insights, and Maureen's dynamic take on building with Flutter. Best of luck, Maureen. Now, let's go back to our topic for today about the book Dear Laura, A Lost Chapter of World War II. In this episode of Positivity Hack Delivered, we'll sit down with Laura Elliott for the second time around, a USA Today and Wall Street Journal best-selling ghostwriter, award-winning screenwriter, and author of Dear Laura, A Lost Chapter of World War II, a father-daughter adventure of courage, faith, and freedom. Laura will take us inside the gripping journey that inspired her memoir, a 2 year global search that revealed her grandfather's hidden role in World War II and deepened her own understanding of faith, family, and resilience. From navigating personal heartbreak to uncovering Longbird secrets, Laura offers profound insights into how our deepest wounds can become pathways of hope. Whether you're drawn to history, searching for meaning in your own story, or simply in need of inspiration, this conversation will remind you that truth has the power to set us free. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Laura. Thank you so much for joining us today, Laura, for the second time around.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here again, and I really appreciate everyone who's here, and I look forward to our conversation.
Yes, and to start, where in the world are you today?
Right now, I'm in Santa Cruz, California, on the beautiful beaches here, and just loving life here. I live here with my husband, and I'm close to my daughters and my grandsons.
Oh, that's very nice. What was the spark of inspiration of your book, dear Laura, and how did your own journey shape the way you told this story?
Well, if you don't mind, I'll read an excerpt because there's a little scene in the book that talks about exactly that. It's from the book right here, Dear Laura, and the chapter is called The Best Days of Your Life. In July 1987, at my home, nestled in the hills of Echo Park in downtown Los Angeles, my brother Mike joined me and my then husband in the celebration of our daughter's first birthday. I stood behind Candace and held her hands in mine, helping her walk barefoot on the expansive redwood deck just outside the French doors of our dining room. We basically lived in a tree house. Most of our square footage was made up of that outdoor deck, protected by a march of cypress trees that descended either side of 100 stairs, terraced every 10 steps. The deck was our living room. We loved the house, and so did Dad. In my kitchen later that year, he held my huge stuffed Mickey Mouse, the one that he'd bought for me when I was a little girl during our first trip to Disney World. He played with Candace, who was sitting in her bouncy chair giggling, and Mickey gave her kisses. Then Dad pulled me aside and said, "These are the best days of your life." I have to admit, his words shocked me. As a young 23-year-old woman, the idea of already living the best part of my life troubled me. Was he right? I wondered. Back at the birthday party, Candace and I continued to toddle along, eventually walking from the redwood deck into the dining room. She giggled at the sight of her birthday cake, the German log roll cake with chocolate buttercream frosting and two pink candles on top continued our family tradition. Candace pushed my hands away and used a little wooden bench to steady herself. I smiled at her, one proud mama. Making wooden benches with Dad was another family tradition. Only a few months before, he and Candace had made the bench together. My brothers, sisters, and I all made them with Dad as kids. They had a simple construction made out of 5 pieces of wood, a large piece for the seat, 2 smaller ones for the legs, and a few narrow diagonal supports. We used the benches to make us more comfortable while doing chores like weeding flower benches and tending Dad's large garden. They also helped us put whatever we needed within our reach. Just before I lifted Candace into her high chair and lit her candles to sing our family birthday songs, Mike, my brother, glanced at the bench and offhandedly whispered, "Concentration camp bench." What are you talking about? I hushed my words as if such a thing could shield my baby from their association with a great evil. "Ask Dad," my brother said. I'm not altogether sure why, on that happy occasion, Mike decided to share this part of Dad's story with me. Maybe his knowledge of the bench was recent, or had burdened him or weighed on him so much that it just blurting it out made him feel better. Or perhaps his was a detached observance, possibly after coming to terms with what he knew of Dad's story over time. In any event, before my brother whispered those words, no one in the family had spoken of Dad's World War II experience. I don't remember when I learned that Dad had been a Japanese POW. I seem to have been born knowing the fact as much a part of me as my skin or hair. After the birthday party and some soul searching, I wrote Dad a letter asking him to tell me the story of the very first wooden bench he made. His reply began our decades-long adventure of finding answers together. The quest to uncover the truth would result in discoveries that put long since forgotten pieces of Dad's life, as well as my own, back together again. We did what he'd spent a lifetime trying not to do. We remembered. And so we exchanged letters over decades. It took me 38 years to write this story and to honor that part of the story, the letter writing part, which was fantastical because, in the 1980s when this discovery was made, there was no internet, there was no instant message, there was just letters that you exchanged in the mail. And so this is Dad's signature on the title. That's exactly how he would start his letters, "Dear Laura." And so that's basically what happened. And we went ahead and wrote. So it shaped the story because I would ask him questions and he would answer them. And we would have visits over the years, of course, for holidays or whatever. And those visits were really, really special. And I remember one time sitting with Dad. He was now ready to open up and share his stories late in life. And I said, well, Dad, this could be really difficult. Like this might be hard. Like I might ask you a question that's really hard to answer. And I said, I just want to let you know, just tell me to pass. Just say, I don't want to answer that. And he took my hands in his and looked at me with the bluest eyes I think I'll ever see in this world, and said, Laura, I will answer every one of your questions. And that was a real pivotal moment. It showed me how much he wanted to know. And it's interesting. That was an interesting journey. We got so close, closer than we ever would have, together, just exploring what he thought was true, using research to find out maybe what was true, what the recollections were. And it led to a journey around the world for me twice to get the answers that Dad was either unable to remember or simply couldn't tell me. So together we went on that journey, and it's really beautiful because when I was young, he was the one who was a world traveler. He would become a hydroelectric engineer traveling all over the world to remote places, and sometimes jungles, sometimes Iceland, in different parts of the world. And he brought the world home to us. But then I found as he was older and ailing and unable to travel through this story, I was able, through the world travels, to answer the questions of the story. I was able to bring the world to him in his final years. And I think that was a great blessing that we shared.
Oh, that's very sweet and amazing. Uh, Your book is set against the backdrop of World War II. What new or surprising perspectives do you think readers will discover that they might not have encountered before?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. I'm finding all kinds of answers from readers to that question. I find that a lot of people, it comes from different places, right? So when we read books about World War II, they're usually in a certain, what they called theater of war. So World War II had a European theater of war, and they had the Pacific theater of war. And usually stories take place in one theater or the other theater. This story takes place in the Pacific theater of war, and because it's a relatively littler known place where stories happen, I really did find the need. World War II stories a lot of them are set in Europe. So the reader really needs to know, where are we? And so it starts out with like a map, literally a map of the world. So that's where we are in the world before World War II. And then the map shows you what what that part of the world looks like after the Japanese occupation. So that's like 6 months after the Japanese occupied Java. So it's a part of the world that's littler known. I don't know, in some regard, with people usually in America. I think more people have heard about the European War, and then people in Europe have told me that they've read the book and found that of course, their history is more European War grounded. So they're learning new things. So I think but this story, Dad's story, and the story that I'm trying to tell with Dad actually takes place in both theaters of war. They are young children in Indonesia, and the custom is, that's where my dad was born, was in Indonesia. That's where the Japanese occupied, and that's why he became a Japanese POW. But before the Japanese invaded Indonesia, they were just growing up. They were just growing up. They were going to school. And one of the customs of the colonial people in Indonesia was to send their children to boarding school in Europe. And my dad and my aunt were sent to a boarding school in Germany in the early 1930s. And unbeknownst to the family, they were getting letters back. This is Hitler's Germany at this point. He's starting to rise to power. My dad writes home and says he's a member of the Hitler Youth. My grandparents say we've got to get our kids out of Germany. So they sail around the world to get their children out of Germany. They settle in Holland for a time and realize that they need to get back to Indonesia. So they escape. They decide to escape to Indonesia because they want to leave the hell of Europe for the heaven of Indonesia, is what they say. So they sail all the way back, and then the war finds them. So it's just a global conflict, and no one escapes that conflict. So they were in both theaters of war, and that's interesting. Also, I think the fact that the families were taken hostage to force a member of their family to work for the Japanese military is another interesting aspect that's different. So my family was taken hostage to force my grandfather to work on a top secret project for the Japanese military in the nuclear program. And so that is a very unique aspect to the story.
And many memoirs and historical stories explore resilience and hope. How does Dear Laura add to that conversation, and what makes it stand apart from other World War II narratives?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting because at its heart, it's a nautical story too. My family, the families were taken. Boats show up a lot in the story. This is one boat. This is called a hell ship, and this is the Tia Maru hell ship. They were taken from Indonesia to Japan to work for the government. The engineers were, and the families that were being held hostage to force them. These hell ships were unmarked. So they were putting a lot of prisoners, the Japanese were putting a lot of prisoners into these boats. Because they were unmarked, the Allies were bombing them, and a lot of them didn't make it. So they were sailing with that boat to their jobs essentially in Japan. And then they were rescued by the USS Lardner when World War II was ended, and that's by the Navy. And these are the men that would save them. It's the crew of the USS Lardner. So they were shocked to find a woman and a small child because my uncle was very small at the time. So these men saved my family off a beach in Hamamatsu. And that's when, just slightly after VJ Day, when Victory over Japan Day, which was the last day of World War II. And a lot of people don't know about that day anymore. But back then, when that was declared, people were looking like this in the streets, celebrating the end of World War II. And then boats appear again in the story, in my telling of the story, because I would use boats to help me write. I would get writing blocks and not be able to go on with the story. And so I had a sailboat named Tessa. I would meet my husband on the sailboat. We would race together. So Tessa's part of the story. And then Blue Moon is part of the story because this is where I would write most of the end of the book. So it's a very nautical story. The Pacific Ocean is a character in the story. It brings the fate of everyone into play. They're torpedoed. They're almost they have to evade forces to get from Indonesia, Singapore to Japan. So that's very interesting. And I think that a lot of it is that readers get to solve the mystery right along with me as I'm solving it and as the families are trying to come to grips with what's happening to them, because a lot of times they don't know where they're going, they don't know where they're ending up. We don't know exactly why these events are happening, and it's a world that, we can't Google things on our phone. So you're in a place, you don't know where you are, you don't have an atlas, you're trying to find out what's going on in the outside world. And this is something that I really learned about Dad. Was he was always fascinated about history. Like, we would sit around the dinner table and he would just talk about any kind of history, like from World War II. He was go on about different kinds of things about history. And as a child, as a young girl, I was like, wow, this is interesting. But, it was kind of like, what's going on here? But then as I got working with Dad and as I unveiled these events, and we got to the heart of the story, I realized, well, what would be more interesting to someone who was locked away as a prisoner of war for nearly 4 years than the history of the world he didn't get to see? So that was very powerful insight when I got to work on it. So I think it's, an interesting look at people who are essentially taken, five families together, and how they try to make sense of the unthinkable, and the power dynamics that kind of happen in that group of families, and how they all adapt or they don't adapt in different ways, and the compassion we can have from learning about this story, about our own lives and how we get caught up in things that are bigger than ourselves, and we can learn from how they react to how we can be in our own life and be gracious to each other. And I think the most powerful thing about it is, you just don't find that many stories where families have been taken together as a group, even too. That's another part. But the other part is, when you read a book about World War II, you really think it's going to be all about this, like, really hard experience. And it is, of course, it's that. But I think the truly surprising part of it is that it's about joy. Dad is so joyful through it all in different ways, not Pollyanna joyful, but the way he is in his life and is not as affected in his life afterwards. His power of forgiveness is incredible. And I think that's the other thing that really sets this apart, is that I grew up, I never heard a bad word about a Japanese person. I never knew anything anything but that, my first car was a Honda. I mean, it was like there was nothing about that about Dad at all. And one of the things that was a really interesting story that I found out was that he worked as a hydroelectric engineer. He had to get a job before he could emigrate to America. America, of course, was inspirational to him because they saved his life and his family's life. And so when he got here, he worked at this company, and the president of the company said, Hans, I want you to take these Japanese engineers that are visiting Chicago, which is where he settled. This is where the company is. I want you to take the visiting Japanese. I hear you spend some time in Japan. Please take these engineers, these hydroelectric engineers around town, show them the sites, show them the architecture. And my dad said, of course. So he just jumped on it. He of course, there's beautiful architecture in Chicago. There's some amazing things for them to see, and he's very excited about this. And he knows the language. He is very gracious. He knows the customs. So he takes them all over Chicago, um, and they have a wonderful time. They are just so excited about the city and are very gracious about Dad's time and taking them around the city. And then the president of the company, Harza Engineering, said to Dad, Mr. Harza, Hans, I just found out you're a prisoner of war in Japan. Why didn't you tell me? He said, if you were, I would never have asked you to arrange this tour otherwise. And he said, it was my absolute pleasure. And he truly meant it. He, and this is the most beautiful thing for me was his power of forgiveness and just being able to be living a joyful life always showed me that joy is a choice, that circumstances, conditions don't define us. And even in prison, the reason he was making these benches was the torture was there was no place to sit. So he found a way to create a bench to have just the joy of sitting, which there was some sort of prison economy where he was able to create these benches in exchange for things. I think some was with the guards, some was with the prisoners. I write about it in the book. It's an interesting system. But just this bench that I have from Dad, this is the last one I made with him. It's right here with me. It sits right here with me. I'll hold it up in front of you. This is the last one I made with Dad. This is the simple construction. And, when I look at it, I just think of joy. He experienced joy. He wanted to make people more comfortable. He didn't know he was going to get out. He resigned himself that maybe this would be his life. If he was going to live it, he was going to find a way to have people sit. And just his role of forgiveness and his way of seeing life really was a wonderful way to grow up. But then it was also a wonderful way as I was experiencing a heartache in the end of a long-term marriage, how I was going to fully forgive and how I was going to have joy in my own life. And, we got to know each other on so many levels. And it's just, and this forgiveness is how I would solve the story, because I was in Bali at the time. I was in Indonesia. I've been to Indonesia many times. The first research trip was 3 weeks in Indonesia and then 2 weeks in Australia. And I thought this was more time than I'd ever taken off in my life. So I thought, oh yeah, that's going to be plenty of time for me to understand the setting of the book. But then I would discover, you could live 3 lifetimes and not fully understand Indonesia. So that trip turned from 3 weeks to 3 months. And then I would go back out into the world for 2 more years and go to many different places. Eventually, I would end up in Bali at a writers and readers festival in Ubud. Ubud Readers and Writers Festival. It's an incredible festival. And I had learned about it the first time I was in Indonesia, but this time I was in Bali just kind of randomly. I was supposed to meet my daughter, Margot. She has business in Asia, but it wasn't going to work out because the trip was canceled at the last minute. So I really had no reason to be in Bali, but I just decided to go anyway. And I went, and the landlord of my Airbnb said, well, the Ubud Readers and Writers Festival is this week. Did you know? And I said, no. I said, I had no idea. I'm very excited. And so I wanted to find out what I could do more than just go to the festival. And one of the breakouts was with Mofo Tutu. She had just written the Book of Forgiving with her father, Desmond Tutu. And I was like, oh, I need help with that. I need to go to that. And so I went to this beautiful luncheon. There were 150 people at this luncheon. And I would literally sit down next to the woman who had essentially all the answers that I was searching for and couldn't find. She's a Dutch lady. She's in the book. Her name's Celine Hofker. And she had written a book about her uncle, great uncle, who had been taken also as a POW. He's an incredible painter. An amazing story. His story is an incredible story. And she was doing the research, but because she's Dutch, she knows she's from Holland. She knows Dutch. She went to the War Museum in The Hague, which has all these incredible documents. And doing the research, she noticed this group of engineers that had been moved as a group. And that's when she told me. She went white when we met because she said, what story are you trying to tell? And I said, I'm telling the story of Alexander Hassenstab and my dad. And she knew the name because she saw the documents and said, I know what project they were working on. They were working on a remote nuclear device. I will put you in touch with these people. And this happened in 2015. So this was like amazing. This is knowledge I never would have gotten had I not been searching and going where everything led. So that's exactly what happened there. And yeah, I mean, it was an incredible way to find out the information I needed to.
It is. And we have here questions from our live audience from
Okay.
mhm, IPOV in Patrick's opinion. Hello, Patrick. Thank you for
Hi,
watching,
Patrick.
Patrick.
Hi.
Incredible recollections, Laura. How did your father or mother, and indeed, how do you feel about the economic rise of Japan from defeat post of World War II?
Oh, that's a great question. I think that, well, personally, I think that everyone needs to live to their God-given potential, and I think it's wonderful when people can do that, and find their, passion and live wonderfully. My dad was doing that with everyone all over the world. His language was energy, the energy of water, hydroelectric engineering. So that he was speaking that and showing that post World War II to us in a very big way. Even with the Soviets, he was in Iceland working on Berfell, which is a project up there. And he was going in the tundra. They were driving all night to get to the remote place. And he was with a bunch of engineers. And in the middle of the night at 3 o'clock, they're like, it is finished. And they stopped the car and they got out this shashlik, which is like shish kebab. And they, at the side of the road, they made a fire and they cooked it. And that became, Dad loved that recipe so much. That became our 4th of July food for the rest of our life, as we were like, that was like our go-to food. We were always having this shish kebab, a Russian recipe, on the July 4th. And this was in the heart of the Cold War. So I think we always are very supportive, forgiving, not forgetting, but forgiving, and moving forward in peace and understanding, learning from what we needed to learn from, and moving forward in a way that supports each other. And I just love that question. Yeah, I love that question. Thanks.
And we have another question from Olga Vasina. Thank you so much for watching. An incredible tale, Laura. Thank you for sharing. Did your mother and father suffer PTSD after the war from the trauma they shared?
Oh, thank you so much, Olga. That is a great question. Um, of course, the trauma was big. Not only my dad had trauma, but my mom also had trauma in different ways in personal relationships. Um, they saw their relationship with the Lord was the most important relationship they had. And so they used the Lord and their ministry. Actually, we come from missionary families. That's why they found themselves in Indonesia. For generations, we went back. My great grandfather Friedrich Kelling started a church in the Celebes, and my great grandfather started a church in Ulusiao. So 2 generations of missionaries were there. So they had quite a bit of faith in the family, to generationally. And that was one of the biggest surprises, I guess. I mean, I did grow up. My parents, we went to church, And I have to tell you honestly, I did it because my parents did it. I admired them. They founded a large church outside of Chicago. They were part of families that supported it. It's Christ Church in Oak Brook, Illinois. And I watched all that, of course. As a child, you're watching all that. You're watching all that. So I really thought that was a beautiful thing. Of course, we had a wonderful life, but your faith really, it's beautiful, but you don't really have it until it's tested. You don't really have it until you can believe in things you can't see yet. It's like that St. Augustine quote. And so my parents went beyond their circumstances, situations, and conditions to believe in a life that's better. And I think that faith caused them to have not the PTSD that you would think they would have suffered. I saw none of it. I think some of the things happened in some of the ways dad responded to life, like the history, for instance, Olga, I was talking about, but also he was a stickler for itineraries, like down to the minute. So like we would go on family vacations and down to the minute. He would make sure every museum was open. Like it was not a lot of random time. And so that came from his wanting to master time. Since he was 18 to 21 and a half, those years were taken away from him. So most years when people are carefree and they're learning about life and they're getting cars and jobs and going to college or whatever, those were taken from him. So he really, time management was huge for him. And he was even studying the time management philosophy of the Japanese. And this was sort of a reason why I even started when I even got this real clarion call to finish it, because in his circles, he would send me packages as I was, a young woman, and I'm having children, and he would send me, things to help me to avoid things that would happen. Like I used to kind of call them packages of fear sometimes because they were a little scary. Sometimes he would send books about, I was living in LA, like the big earthquake to be afraid of, or the next financial disaster that was coming, or something like that. But then he was always through in something about mastering time. And there's the circle of the important and the circle of the crucial. And how do you know which is which, it was when I realized, there's all kinds of things we need to do. They're not high priority. And I realized about his talk about where they are, the important, necessary, the important, and the crucial. And when I lost mom in 2020, I realized that it was crucial to tell the story now because time was going. And so he did have those aspects, Olga. There were things. I can't say that, that's something everybody does. So there were outward signs, I suppose. But overall, I would say we were really raised. I think they found a great comfort in their faith. And I think they also, which was wonderful to see. And then my faith deepened as I had nowhere to go and I didn't know my next steps. And I had to have faith in what I couldn't see to know and develop their same kind of faith. And so my faith deepened. It went from something I saw my parents do to something that also got me through. And I also had the wonderful experience of having both of my parents to share that experience with me.
Hashtag inspiring. As Patrick says, what a remarkable man your father was, Laura. Kudos to him. And also a comment from Natalie. It's incredible how your father's story isn't just about survival, but about finding joy and choosing forgiveness. That kind of resilience is so rare and inspiring.
Thank you, Natalie. Thank you, Natalie. It's so true. I think that's a huge part of resilience. I think, and really I really recommend the book of Forgiving by Mofo Tutu. I believe that was one of the key things that really helped me too. She had gone through quite an amazing experience in South Africa. Her story is chilling, and she got a doctorate of divinity in forgiving. And I was like, when I learned about that at the lunch, and I was sitting next to Celine, I was like, wow, I didn't know they even gave those, but that would be really good to get. And the thing that I learned so much about forgiveness, I don't know, not so much for Dad. It seemed I wasn't along on his process of the forgiveness, but for my own, it was really about it's a process, you know. It's not like a destination you forgive and you're at forgiveness island and you live there your whole life, you know. It's not, you know. um, I'll give you a perfect example, and I updating people that follow me on my social media because I said that I would give an update about it, and so it happens all the time, right? So Dad forgave, you know, but I still need to work on it all the time, right? In my own life for different things. And so I was writing on a huge project last week and I needed a break. And so I walked the beach. You know, we don't normally, it was in the middle of the day. I wasn't going to walk the beach. I was just going to go look at the waves. I asked my husband, can you come look at the waves with me? And he's like, sure. So we got there and I'm like, I need a little bit more than this. Let's go for a beach walk. So we go for the beach walk and we see this bird. I see the bird. We both see it. And I think it's dead. You know, it's sad. You know, you see a bird on the beach. It's not well, you know, or dead. You're like, oh no, that's too bad. Well, then a dog came by and started like, um, kind of sniffing it. And the bird, got up and really tried to defend itself, like just went at it, like really defended itself. And I'm like, oh my God. So I got busy. So I ran to a woman who asked if she had a cell phone. She generously gave me her cell phone. I called the wildlife people that will come get hurt birds, and they said, okay, yeah, we'll be there. Tell us what beach. We'll be there in 20 minutes. Where is the bird? And I'm like, well, the bird is a little bit away from the shore. And they're like, okay, you might have to hammock it and put it up the beach so it doesn't get swept out to sea. And so I was like, okay, I had a sweater on. So I'm like, okay, I will use my sweater as a hammock. So I get down to the beach and my husband starts building a shelter around the bird, and the waves come in and the bird's almost overcome. So I put my sweater around, I see the waves coming and I hammock the bird and put it at the beach. We didn't want to move it because we didn't want to do more harm. Okay. So, but it was going to drown and it wasn't going to be able to swim. So we got him at the beach. Then Mark, the man from Wildlife Rescue, came and he was so great. He took care of the bird. And I said, what kind of bird is that? And he said, and it's a common moor, he said. And those birds, we don't see. They're out to sea. They're seabirds. We don't see them on shore at all, you know? And I said, oh, like, oh my gosh. And I was shaking the whole time. I was shaking so much. I was shaking when I was looking out at the Pacific and looking at those waves. And I was shaking as the waves were coming in. And then I really shook as I moved the bird because I didn't want to hurt the bird because it was suffering so much. And it must have been scared and frightened. And I was like teary-eyed and really crying about it. And I didn't realize why I was so overwhelmed until I realized that my family was rescued off a beach, and seeing the bird in pain and then rescued off the beach just took my breath away. I was just like, I was in like this other state. Like I couldn't, it was just, it really resonated with me deeply, and it still resonates with me deeply. And so, from that beach, this time frame 80 years ago, my family was taken to a hospital in Manila to survive severe malnutrition, starvation essentially. And so, that whole aftermath of that is still living inside me in ways that, I've forgiven, I've done all I know how to do, but you go through these times where it's still there, right? It's still a process. Like you think, why did dad and the family have to go through this? Why in the world, And but why isn't a spiritual question? It's just you kind of have to remind yourself, to let go and to remember the good things that have come from things. And so anybody, Natalie, working on forgiveness and resilience, I think it really is around the inner peace we get from true forgiveness and not beating us up over it when we discover it's a process. We're only human beings. We're spiritual beings having a human experience, and we're going to have that happen from time to time.
Yes.
So
80
anyway,
years.
the
Mhm.
update is the mirror is great. It's healed. It's the bird. I got the update from the wildlife people. They
Mhm.
are taking it out to sea. The international people are taking it out, and it's healed. It was there for 5 days, and yay! So
Yes, that's good. That's great.
it's really great. That little guy. Oh, and they mate for life.
Oh, wow.
So that part is really amazing.
It is. And, um, 80 years after the end of World War II, why do you think a book like Dear Laura is especially relevant now? And what do you hope readers carry with them after finishing it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, 80 years after the end of World War II, I think Dear Laura resonates because we're still grappling with questions of identity, of resilience, and belonging in a fractured world. I mean, what is more topical than that right now? The war may feel like distant history, but the choices people faced, whether to resist, adapt, or find hope amid chaos, are timeless. So, by telling this story now, I want to remind readers that ordinary individuals, especially women, often carried extraordinary burdens and still managed to create beauty, strength, and legacy in that environment. And my hope is that readers will come away with a deeper appreciation for the human capacity to endure, and also with a sense of connection that the past isn't just something we remember. It's something that can guide us in the present. It's not like the past is over. It's not like it's never existed. It really informs our DNA, like in every decision we make, and every our outlook, our point of view. Another lesson I think that feels, especially urgent today is how authoritarianism rarely arrives, all at once. It seeps in slowly, often disguised as promises of safety or national pride. Um, I've never been in a world war. I hope never to be in one. But I came to this story with ideas that you would as a modern person would have. Like, I thought the Japanese invade Java, Indonesia, and everything's changed. Like, everything's different. Like, and I asked dad about that. I said, because he was telling me his story, and I said, I would have thought, dad, that, things would have changed overnight. And he said, oh no, he said, he equated to freedom as a salami. And he said, they take your freedom away one slice at a time. And that was chilling to hear from him. And I probably heard that in the early 90s. But I think that all over the world, we can see that that's actually really true. It's like the frog in the bucket, who is in the bucket, the frog's in the bucket, and the water is warm. It's getting warmer, but it doesn't know because it's in the bucket and the water's warm. And then eventually the water starts boiling and he's too out of sorts to know to have jumped out. So it's that kind of interesting cross-section of the loss of freedom and the change of sensibilities that helps you lose your freedom, that this story really, really illustrates. And, it also shows how, ordinary people living through World War II had to make tough choices. I mean, whether to comply, resist, or protect those around them. That kind of history is a reminder that democracy is fragile. Silence and complacency can allow destructive forces to take root. Um, and my hope is that readers see parallels to our own moment and feel empowered to stay vigilant, to speak up, and to remember that safeguarding freedom is not just the work of leaders. It is the responsibility of all of us. And I think it really starts with using our own voices, knowing we have one, understanding that they're very powerful, and not to stay silent. If someone asks you a question and wants your opinion, speak it, say it lovingly, speak up. And I think, I used to get in my personal situation, I mean, it's very easy, right? I mean, everybody says that, oh yeah, that's so easy, but it's really hard to do in real life. And for me particularly, I understand that. I used to get stunned into silence. I used to, when things were so bad, I would lose my voice. For some reason, I don't know why that was, but that doesn't happen anymore. I don't get stunned into silence anymore. It's really important to use your voice. So that's why I think Dear Laura is relevant today.
Laura, this conversation is very, very inspiring. And as we go towards the end of our show, I will I will ask you our standard questions that we always ask our PhD guests. Eleanor Roosevelt once said, "Women are like tea bags. We don't know our true strength until we are in hot water." In life, how are you in hot water, Laura? How are you brewing?
Well, I would love to say that I'm at that delicious time of tea where the hot water is done and, the bag's just sitting in the water and I'm making a beautiful brew of tea. I feel like my time of trial I've come through. I did not come through it perfectly, but I did come through it knowing and having a deeper relationship with the Lord, which for me has made the most flavorful tea. And I feel like when you've been able to get through hardship, and come to the other side, there's a certain generosity of spirit that flavors that tea that you can pass on to other people. And so I'm hoping I'm doing great. I've brewed perfectly, and I'm hoping to serve a lot of tea to people.
And we can see it today. So, really great. What is the number one book you can sit and think, oh, I wish I read before I started my career?
Oh, this is such a great question. This is The Artist Way, by Julia Cameron. This book was given to me. Actually, I helped my kindergarten class, Margot, my daughter Margot's kindergarten class. Her kindergarten teacher was named Miss O, and I helped them paint banners and do all kinds of things over the years. So it was just like a gift she gave me. The kindergarten teacher gave me this gift. I still have it. And it's a wonderful book. It's called The Artist's Way. It's not for artists. It is for artists, but it's for everyone who are creative, who are the moms, anyone who's wants to be more creative, or executives or leaders, to see things in a different way. And the biggest part of that is her morning pages. She suggests that you write 3 pages in the morning to get all your thoughts out so that you can really get to the gem thoughts that you need to get to. And she also talks about having an artist date, taking yourself out and doing something. It doesn't have to cost any money. Like it could be that beach walk I went on, it's just like, just take yourself out in nature, give yourself this time to be with you and your creativity, your inspiration, to get in line with your higher power, and just get you that's another way to ignite your creativity. And the reason is because when you're creative, you're always pouring out to people, you're always giving a lot, and so you don't want your cup to be empty. So this fills your creative cup so that you can give to others.
Let's imagine that you could meet anyone in the world for a private breakfast. Who would it be and where would you choose to meet?
Well, for me, it would be Ridley Scott. He's an incredible director, producer of film, and I would meet him. I lived in Los Angeles in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, and to sort of 2010. And so I know the world. I worked at E! Entertainment. I worked at Los Angeles Times. I love Los Angeles and the culture and everything. But what I miss is probably where Ridley Scott and I would have the ideal conversation would be at the Originals Farmers Market in Los Angeles at that time frame, like 80s, 90s, when it was just easy to park, easy to get there, and not associated with the fancy Grove, which is beautiful. It's all beautiful right now. But I liked sort of the rustic old LA part of it. And I'd want to, it was, have breakfast and talk basically everything filmmaking. I mean, it would go from Gladiator, how the cinematography that went into that, all the artistry that went into that, and then the creative process and the inspirations that, he had, like with the filming of like Thelma and Louise. I love the character study of that. And I'd love to know how he scouted locations for that shoot, because they were just incredible. I just absolutely love that film. So I would just talk to him all day long as he would let me, about filmmaking and how to write a really compelling screenplay.
And lastly, can you please give us your favorite life lesson quote?
Yeah, well, it's great. Like for me, I would say, God, all things are possible. That's my quote that I live by. I have a hard time remembering it. I mean, I really, really do. I believe it to my core, and yet all kinds of doubt comes in and all kinds of things when I'm just relying on myself. And I think that's part of it is, it, I try not to be prideful that what I'm doing is me. It's not. It's definitely not just me. It's definitely been inspired by a higher power for sure. And it's to that I always look when I'm constantly faced with the same thing. And it's that same thing. You think there's forgiveness island, you think there's self-doubt island, you think there's, you don't have this perfect kind of confidence that you always have. And sure, you do, of course, you're growing. But if you're also on your growing edge, you're testing it, right? So you're not always living in your comfort zone where you're going to be comfortable all the time. Probably most people aren't. And so we're testing the bounds of what we can do. We're doing that next big thing. We're living big. We're going big, which is the message of the book, is to go big. When I have choices, I always look, what's the more expansive choice that I can make here? Don't like to live in contraction, but yet there's this, oh, can I really do that? Well, I don't have to know the how. I think William Murray, who was also a World War II POW, he wrote. He would climb Everest, and he wrote his first manuscript on toilet paper in the prison. It was confiscated and destroyed, but he wrote a book called Absence of Evidence. And he basically said that until one is committed, the moment definitely, until you're committed and the moment of commitment definitely comes, then providence moves too. And there's something about that. So yes, you want to confidently move forward in the direction of your dreams, like Thoreau says, and things will come to you. this book testifies to, in that walk, all the things that I could never have gotten myself to tell the story came just by taking that one step.
And that's it from our 194 of the PhD live stream. Thank you, Laura,
Thank
for
you.
joining us.
Thank you,
And
everybody.
to stay updated and ensure you never miss a positivity hack delivered, follow Women on IT and turn on notifications to be alerted once video has been released. Stay tuned for our next episodes. More details will be announced soon. And thank you for our fabulous team, AJ, Natalie, and Gracie, and to our commentators, IP with Patrick Young and Olga Basina, and to our social media queen, Natalie. As always, our positivity quote comes from positive thinking only and goes look for something positive in each day. Even if some days you have to look a little harder. Today is your day. Hack the future. Hack the positivity you want. Thank you.